I believe we can start, Chair.
Yep, ready to proceed.
Okay, good evening and welcome to Hackney's Planning Committee. Just to say, the Council will be recording this meeting and the proceedings will be live streamed on YouTube. My name is Councillor Vincent Stops and I shall be chairing this evening's meeting. We'll be undertaking the meeting as close a fashion as we can to how we used to undertake meetings, so it'll look and feel much the same. The virtual meeting technology has a chat function. Please only use it to raise technology related issues. I shan't be looking at it. And when your camera's turned on, the meeting, please ensure you're visible, especially members. Members must stay in the room effectively for the whole of the meeting. Participants who have registered their interest to speak in the meeting will only speak when invited to do so by me. Only one person may speak at a time, and if you have registered to speak, turn on the microphone when you're asked to speak. If anybody deliberately disrupts the meeting, we do have the capability of removing you from the meeting. I hope that's not going to be necessary. In the event of an internet outage, we will adjourn and we'll try and reform ourselves. Any committee member who isn't able to participate throughout will not be able to take part in the vote because you'll need to be here all of the time. And I'm going to go round and ask members to introduce themselves. Just to say, first of all, we've got Gareth, not a member, Gareth, our committee services. We've got Natalie, who normally sits on my left as our head of planning, and we've got Tom Moritz, who's our legal officer with us this evening, and there are lots of other planning officers to advise us, some internal and some external. And so can I just ask members to introduce themselves? So Councillor Hanson.
Councillor Hanson, Vice Chair.
Councillor Fajan Thomas.
Good evening, Susan Fajana Thomas here.
Councillor Levy. Councillor Levy, can you introduce yourself? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was moving.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, I'm here now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Councillor Potter.
Hello, Councillor Potter here.
And Councillor Race.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Race here.
Thank you very much. So how the meeting will proceed?
Chair, sorry to interject. Couple of
Councillor Lynch.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Lynch.
Chair, apologies to interject. Sorry, everybody. I also wanted to bring to your attention there is another legal officer at this meeting, Christine Stevenson.
Okay. Anna, please introduce.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name's Councillor Anna Lynch.
Okay, thank you. So how the meeting will proceed. We'll hear each application summarised by the officers. What will be effectively a 10-minute statement from objectors and a 10-minute statement from the applicant. Members then feel free to ask questions. It's my role to make sure that members have all the information they need to make a decision, objectors and applicants have their say, and that the meeting runs properly. I'll not be taking any contribution from the floor. This is a meeting. What we hear this evening. We must only take account of the policies and adopted by this council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Members making the decision should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any application prior to the meeting. Similarly, if they have an interest in the application, cite all the people involved, they should declare that interest and may remove themselves from the decision. If you do remove yourself from the decision, it doesn't apply this time, I don't think. We'd normally have a mechanism to call you back in, but that's okay. I know one member is leaving us after the first item and won't need to rejoin us. When we've finished our deliberations, we'll vote on the recommendation and I'll describe the voting procedure before we vote. Effectively, you put your hand up and hold it there until we have a roll call around the committee. The applicant, when the decision's made, that's the final thing for the committee ordinarily. The applicant may appeal our decision to Secretary of State. Objectors may seek legal redress. I'd advise you to seek professional advice in either case. Now we'll move to the agenda. So the agenda, first of all, we've got apologies for absence. Are there any, please, Gareth?
There are apologies for absence from Councillor Joseph, Councillor Bell and Councillor Snell.
Okay, declarations of interest. So for this first item, just to declare, I think we've all received a lot of representations from members of the public. That's my only declaration. I assume it's replicated across the members. We'll take that for as read. Are there any other declarations at all? Councillor Lynch, you have one on the second item.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In regard to the second item on the agenda tonight, I have previously been involved with residents and spoken in support of residents' concerns, and for that reason, I will appropriately leave the meeting at that point and will not take part in that agenda item and the subsequent voting.
Thank you. Item 4, I've got no urgent items, so we're going to move straight to item 5, and that's the Woodbury Down item. I just want to do two things really, and that is to make sure that we've got the right timing for the objectors, because we've had to negotiate how long they'll speak. So Gareth, can you reel off the timing, please?
Just bear with me one moment, please. I've just got to go to your chair's brief.
Before you, I can get to it before you.
Okay.
So we've got Anne King. Are you there, Anne?
I've
Yes.
actually checked. Oh, yes.
Anne, 4.5 minutes. Leslie, 1.5 minutes. Leslie Benson. Susie Nelson, 1.5. One and a half minutes.
And Dr. Barbara Panuza, Chair.
If we have any time left towards the end, to make up 10 minutes, because we've got to draw a line at 10 minutes. I hope that works for everybody. Is that okay? Anne, Leslie, Susan, Janice, and hopefully Barbara.
Yeah, that's okay.
Can I just kindly ask that some time is found for me to share my objection,
We'll
purely
try.
because it relates to a different matter to the
what is
to the
your
people
matter
speaking
then,
before
Barbara?
me. It's with regards to the loss of light and privacy to some of the buildings in the existing places.
Yeah, and then come what may, if it's a different item.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, so 1 minute, Graham, for Barbara, please. The next thing is to ask Natalie just to introduce the item before the case officer does, and tell us, I guess, why we're here this evening looking at this issue again. So, Natalie, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Yes.
Some nods, great, okay. Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just explaining why the application has been re-referred to Planning Committee. So members will recall that the planning application for phase 3 of Woodbury Down was considered at our very first planning subcommittee, virtual planning subcommittee, on the 23rd of April this year. At the meeting in April, members voted to grant permission subject to conditions, completion of the Section 106 agreement and referral to the GLA. The application before members this evening is for the same proposal. The reason the application has been re-referred to Planning Subcommittee is because of the adoption of a new development plan. So members will be aware that the Council adopted Local Plan 2033 to replace its core strategy, Development Management Local Plan, and part of the Site Allocations Local Plan, and that was adopted in July this year. The new local plan was adopted before the Section 106 agreement could be completed and a decision issued. Whilst the re-reporting of this application is primarily to allow the assessment of the proposal against the policies in Local Plan 2033, the re-referral also provides an opportunity to ensure that the process is legally correct in light of the Holborn Studios judgment, which was handed down in May. The Planning Subcommittee is not bound by the decision taken at the meeting in April, as no formal decision on the planning application was issued, and as a result, the application remains live. In considering the application tonight, members have a duty to have regard to the provisions of the development plan and any other material considerations as set out in the Town and Country Planning Act. Members will need to decide whether the adoption of Local Plan 2033 and any other changes since the 23rd of April, material to the consideration of the application, would lead to a different conclusion. The previous decision, the previous resolution, is an important starting point, and the Planning Committee report sets out the key policy changes introduced by the new local plan and the additional and amended information provided by the applicant. If the Planning Subcommittee were to arrive at a different decision to that taken in April, members would need to set out sound planning reasons to explain why. The local planning authority could be accused of unreasonableness if a different conclusion is reached and there is no material change in circumstances or any other good planning reason given for reaching a different conclusion. I hope that helps explain why the application has been re-referred. Obviously, the case officer will provide more details in her presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, over to you, Catherine, please.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind bearing with me while I put my presentation up, Councillor Stops, if you could just confirm when it comes up, that would be very helpful.
Okay. So it's starting to whir around. There we are.
Okay. Right. Good evening. My name is Catherine Slade. I'm a Principal Planning Officer in the Planning Growth Team at the London Borough of Hackney, and I will be presenting item 5 on the agenda tonight. Planning application 2019/2514 relating to land within the Woodbury Down estate. Firstly, I would like to draw members' attention to the addendum report. I appreciate that it is quite a lengthy document, so I will go through it briefly. Firstly, members will be aware that a substantial amount of additional representations have been received, including from the Woodbury Down Labour Party. These predominantly relate to the matter of the Happy Man tree, however, other matters were also raised. These are set out in the addendum report. In particular, many of these representations ask for attention to be drawn to the various media and social media campaigns and other works related to or inspired by the Happy Man tree. The decentralised energy network I will discuss in my presentation. There were also 7 additional reporting representations that have been received, as well as a consultation response from the Hackney Society Planning Group and Stoke Newington Conservation Area Advisory Committee. Their response is set out in full, as well as other notes from consultees. We have received a number of complaints about the consultation procedure, including that the Council's comment submission facility on the planning website was not working and that application documentation has not been publicly available. This has been checked by a number of different officers in different teams and found to be working, and that's discussed in the addendum report. And I would like to say that the local planning authority has complied with statutory and local consultation requirements, including the issue of 1,000 plus letters, 6 site notices and a press advert. A petition has been organised by third parties for the retention of the tree and redesign of the scheme. This hasn't been formally submitted to the local planning authority, but it has been submitted to the council as a whole, and the council formally responded to this in June. Amended information has been also submitted in relation to the proposed landscaping scheme, and I'll be talking about that in my presentation. Councillor Stopps made a request for a summary of financial viability figures, which is set out in the table on the addendum report. These figures are taken from the BNP Paribas review of the financial viability assessment. And as I said earlier, Anthony Lee of that company is here to provide any comments or explanation that is required in relation to viability. There was also a request to clarify the Seven Sisters Road the scope of the Seven Sisters Road negotiations. These relate predominantly to procedural matters, and I want to reassure members that they don't in any way seek to reduce monies being secured or change the ultimate objectives of the Seven Sisters Road improvement scheme. There are also some amendments to conditions which relate to the trigger points of various conditions that are tied to demolition works. So, moving on to the actual proposal. Members will be aware, as Natalie said, that this application was originally reported to the Planning Subcommittee in April 2020, when a unanimous resolution was taken to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and referral to the Mayor of London. Again, as members are aware, since that resolution, the Council's new development plan, as LP33, has been adopted. As planning decisions are required to be taken in accordance with the development plan, a review of the proposal's compliance with LP33 has been undertaken. In general, the objectives of LP33 policies are aligned with those of the previous development plan, and as a result, the proposal is largely compliant with them. However, there are some policies that have additional requirements. These are discussed in the main report and are illustrated in this presentation. So, for anyone who isn't aware, Phase 3 is one of a series of land parcels which cumulatively make up the Woodbury Down estate, which is shown in its entirety on this slide. Phase 3 is highlighted on this plan in light pink. It's located centrally within the estate to the southeast of the junction of Seven Sisters Road and Woodbury Grove. The site is identified on this slide as the land within the red line. It contains 4 existing blocks of flats located to the south of Seven Sisters Road. 3 buildings on the site, including the former Robin Redmond Community Centre and the Happy Man Public House, have been demolished under the scope of the previous Reserve Matters Planning Permission for the redevelopment of the site, which was granted under 2015/2967. The principle of the redevelopment of the land by way of a residential-led mixed-use development has been established through historic planning consents and the evolution of past and present development plan policy, including as a site allocation under LP33 policy MH1. The proposal is therefore acceptable in principle, subject to consideration of the material planning considerations of the scheme proposed. The application before members is a full application for the demolition of the existing buildings and construction of 4 residential blocks ranging in height from 6 to 20 stories, providing 584 residential units, commercial and community floor space, and an energy centre, together with ancillary hard and soft landscaping, including a public park. Block A, shown here in the foreground at the junction of Seven Sisters Road and Woodbury Grove, would provide the bulk of the 243 affordable housing units that the scheme will deliver. The materiality of the development would be largely brick, the colour and detailing of which will differentiate different parts of the development as shown on this slide. The materiality and architectural detailing of the proposal has previously been found to be acceptable by the Planning Subcommittee, subject to the submission of details by way of condition. The block plan shows the general arrangement of the buildings, which would form 2 larger blocks in the north of the site, which are arranged around central podium gardens at first floor level, with a smaller building and pair of buildings to the south. The design principle of arranging groups of buildings around podium gardens at first floor level is established elsewhere within Woodbury Down, and in the case of Phase 3 has evolved from previous iterations of the proposal. Blocks A and B would both provide flexible commercial and community floor spaces at ground floor level, which will provide active frontage along Seven Sisters Road and Woodbury Grove. The 0.6 hectare public park, which would extend between the East Reservoir and Seven Sisters Road, is in the east of the site. I won't go through the proposal in too much detail, however, I do need to draw members' attention to certain elements of the proposal. Block A will house the primary energy centre of the Woodbury Down estate over basement and ground floor levels, shown here at ground floor. The use and emissions of the energy centre and its long-term maintenance and operation, including connection to existing phases of the Woodbury Down estate, will be controlled by way of condition. The wording of the relevant conditions is intended to allow flexibility in the delivery of the service of the energy centre and allow the use of alternative energy sources other than that currently proposed, such as are being investigated under the scope of the Zero Carbon Transition Plan for Woodbury Down, which is currently being worked up, details of which are required by way of condition. However, notwithstanding this, the principle of the use of a gas-fired system is acceptable in the provisions of Policy LP56. On the associated subject of carbon dioxide emissions, it is recognised that the proposal does not achieve the policy target, but this will be compensated for through a carbon offset payment of £95 per tonne, which Policy LP55, Mitigating Climate Change, allows for. Car parking for returning residents and blue badge holders only will also be provided within these blocks. The exception of housing estate regeneration schemes to the principle of zero car parking in new developments is supported by Policy LP45. This slide shows the entirety of the proposed development, and in particular the massings and heights of the different elements of the proposal, which have previously been found by the Planning Subcommittee to be acceptable. The two marker buildings of 12 and 20 stories are shown. The remainder of the buildings are 6 to 9 stories in height. Most of these buildings will be set back at the top 2 stories. It is recognised that there will be an impact on the residential amenity of the occupiers of some existing units in terms of light, outlook and privacy as a result of the proposal. However, the application has previously been assessed and found to be acceptable in these terms by the Planning Subcommittee. The key driver for the redevelopment is the re-provision of affordable housing of a higher quality than existing. The proposal will deliver 243 affordable housing units, 117 for social rent and 126 for shared ownership, representing 42% of the total housing yield of the development. This slide shows the general tenure distribution throughout the site. Red indicates market housing, yellow shared ownership, and blue social rented, although affordable housing is also provided at the ground floor level of Block B here, and also Building A4 here. This slide also illustrates why any proposal to amend the scheme to accommodate the Happy Man tree will have a potential impact on the deliverability of affordable housing, as all units lost from the relevant block would be in shared ownership, as shown here. I'll now go through the main areas where development plan policy has changed in detail. A new policy requirement is the achievement of a high urban greening factor. Documentation provided in support of the application showed the development to achieve 0.38, which is marginally below the policy target of 0.4, but in itself acceptable in the overall context of the uplift in landscaping and biodiversity and the proposed conditions. However, the landscaping proposals have been further amended through the introduction of rain gardens along internal streets, which result in the development achieving policy objective 0.4. These amendments are available to view on the Council's website and result in the application being compliant with this policy. Private and public play space will be provided within the podium gardens, public park and within the streetscape. This would include doorstep play space for the youngest children and local and neighbourhood spaces for older children. The play space provision has been enhanced and updated to ensure compliance with that policy LP50, which requires a minimum provision of 10 metres per child, and now provides an additional 190 square metres, mainly through the enlargement of previously proposed areas. Whilst not providing formal play space, the provision of a southern east-west internal street following removal of the vehicular access as a living street, which is secured by way of conditions in Section 106 legal agreement, will further enhance the quality of the environment for younger residents. The indicative landscaping strategy has, through negotiations during the course of the application, been enhanced through the retention of more trees than originally proposed and the introduction of additional planting throughout the site, including of mature specimen trees within recreational areas and a continuous row of pleached hornbeams along the site frontage with Seven Sisters Road. The planting, which also includes the installation of living roofs to all buildings, will result in an overall biodiversity increase across the site, and on balance will adequately mitigate the loss of existing mature trees on the site. This, together with the introduction of swift bricks by way of an amendment to Condition 11, results in compliance with Policy LP47. As members will be aware, there was an extensive discussion about the Hackman tree at the April Planning Subcommittee, and there is no question that it is a Category A specimen of considerable amenity value. Subsequent to the original Planning Subcommittee meeting, a significant number of additional representations have been received, raising concern over the loss of the Hackman tree, some of which query whether it is ancient or veteran. The tree has been assessed by 2 independent arboricultural consultants and the Council's arboricultural officers, and they are in agreement that the tree is neither ancient nor veteran. A lot of representations have claimed cultural significance for the tree, and I'm in no way trying to diminish its amenity value for local residents. However, being an attractive specimen and being held in affection by many people is not the same as having cultural significance such that it confers veteran status. For example, other trees on the Tree of the Year shortlist have cultural value by virtue of being associated with historic figures or myths and folklore relating to healing, romance, and death over centuries. Nothing comparable applies in this case. The government guidance on ancient and veteran trees states that the key feature of such trees is the presence of decay features, such as deadwood and hollowing, which contribute to the biodiversity, cultural, and heritage value of such specimens. These features do not exist in this case. To further put this into context, the Woodland Trust's inventory of ancient and veteran trees records no ancient and only 6 veteran London planes within the London Borough of Hackney, all of which are located in Clissold Park or Abney Park Cemetery. And to compare 2 locations well known for their London planes, there are none recorded along the entirety of the embankment and only 1 veteran in Berkeley Square. Moving on to development plan policy, the relevant LP33 policy, LP51, is not significantly different to the previous one in that it seeks where possible to retain valuable specimens, but the policy does allow for their removal in cases where the overriding planning benefits of a proposal can be demonstrated and adequate replacement planting is proposed. The caveat value of this specimen has been calculated by the council as being £175,000, caveat standing for capital asset valuation of amenity trees, and this sum has been secured by way of legal agreement to compensate for its loss in the street scene. This will be put towards replanting of equivalent specimens in respect of species in the vicinity of the site, which will ultimately grow to a similar stature. This will complement the landscaping scheme, which is high quality and includes the planting of mature specimens within the site. On balance, the securing of financial compensation to allow for appropriate street tree planting to offset its loss to public amenity, together with the delivery of substantial planting within the site and the provision of a large public park within the development, are considered to outweigh the loss of this and other trees as a result of the proposal. A number of alternative options have been investigated by the applicants, which would have potentially retained the tree. However, they were, on balance, found to be unacceptable in terms of either their impact on the design of the scheme, impacts on the engineering and deliverability of the energy centre, or as a result of the loss of affordable housing. Details of some of these are set out in the removal of Building A1 South study, which is available on the Council's website. Members will also be aware that third parties have also put forward alternative proposals. However, none of these alternative proposals have been fully assessed in respect of such matters as detailed design, relationship to the wider streetscape, impact on residential amenity or microclimate effects. And furthermore, none of these alternatives have been put forward as a formal amendment by the applicants to the proposal under consideration, which has to be considered on its own merits. So, in conclusion, the proposal being redevelopment of an existing estate within the Council's regeneration programme through a residential-led mixed-use development is acceptable in principle. The development will provide 584 high-quality new residential units, of which 42%, 243, will be affordable. Of these, 48%, 117 units, will be social rented. The proposal will also deliver the primary energy centre for existing and proposed phases of development, providing a decentralised energy system for the wider estate, as well as a substantial contribution towards the Seven Sisters Road Improvement Scheme. which will reduce the physical and psychological barrier between north and south parts of the estate, as well as other financial contributions towards social infrastructure, which are listed in full in the Planning Subcommittee report. Whilst it is recognised that the proposal will result in the loss of existing trees, the development will deliver a substantial quantum of new landscaping throughout the site, including the planting of 8 specimen trees and a new public park, which, together alongside ecological enhancements identified in the supporting documentation, will contribute to an overall uplift in biodiversity across the site and enhance the local environment. These benefits, together with the proposed mitigation, are considered to outweigh the material planning harm arising from the proposed development. A resolution to grant planning permission was taken in April 2020. The application is being re-reported due to the adoption of LP, and notwithstanding the various options investigated by both the applicant and third parties, the application has not been substantially amended since then. The proposal remains compliant with development plan policy, subject to mitigation secured by way of conditions in legal agreement, and for this reason, the proposal is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Catherine. Right, we're going to now move to objectors. And just to tell members, I did accede to a request for a bit more time this evening, primarily because we've clearly only got one item, and our normal full schedule normally stops us having any more time. And there were 7 people who wanted to speak initially. We've managed to talk to them, and there's going to be, I think, 5 speaking this evening. We're going to start with Anne King, 4.5 minutes, and you must stop after 4.5 minutes. Leslie Benson, 1.5 minutes. Susie Nelson, Janice Trotter, and Barbara for a minute at the end. She's going to talk on the issue of light, I think it is. Okay, so we've got Graham, you're timing us?
Yep, I will do. For each of the speakers, I'll give you a 30 seconds.
Put your camera on and wave at us and shout when we get up to time. That would be good.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll give a 30-second notice, please.
Okay, Anne King then, please.
Hello.
Hello.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Evening, everyone. My name is Anne King. Sorry, just trying to hold the mobile phone. My name is Anne King, and I'm a Woodbury Down resident and represent the Friends of the Happy Man Tree. We call on Hackney Council to respect the wishes of local people and retain the tree. It's not acceptable to be faced with a choice between social housing and this much-loved tree. We believe, with commitment, both can be achieved. The local plan says all development proposals must retain and protect existing trees of amenity value, those that have interest biologically, aesthetically, or culturally. This 150-year-old Grade A tree is an amenity tree. It has biological value because it is the only tree of that maturity in that location. Russell Miller of the Tree Musketeers says it is increasingly difficult to establish London plane trees due to global warming. 1,000 trees planted tomorrow would take 10 years to produce the same amount of oxygen as this tree. Tree planting mitigation cannot therefore compensate for the loss of the mature trees. And many of the young trees already planted on the estate haven't survived. Hackney's recent survey confirms that the tree is healthy with high amenity value and definite aesthetic value relating to its location and crown shape. The planning report from April notes that the loss of this specimen represents substantial harm to biodiversity and the public amenity of the local area. Our legal advisor's statement to the council discusses that the tree was previously acknowledged as a veteran tree. The new report decides that it is not, based on limited evidence and partly because of lack of long-standing cultural value. How would someone visiting the tree for the first time for a short period be able to assess cultural value? We have not been given the time to challenge this report and instruct our own tree expert. The Happy Man tree has been a cultural reference point for many decades, and in recent months appreciation has grown as it has become a focal point. Incredible stories have been told about memories of the tree and the estate. We've circulated material about the support for the tree and some of the tree has even been placed around it for the Woodlands Trust Tree of the Year. This is a massive accolade for the tree. And Hackney Council should be praising, and yeah, they should be praising of this. Woodbury Down has undergone extensive changes and community fragmentation has created a profound sense of loss for some longer term residents. There's a socio-economic and socio-cultural inequality between many of the residents. Retaining the tree is an issue of social justice. Long-standing residents have expressed that they don't wish to see yet another part of their local heritage removed. It's a challenge to capture the voices of these residents who may not access an online planning process, but on the street they're loud and clear. Berkeley Homes may choose to frame the issue as a binary choice between housing and the tree in their aggressive marketing, but most people want both. Regrettably, the promised public Woodco meeting was only advertised the day before on its website, with the effect that only 2 non-board members attended. Woodco has not sought the views of the estate and cannot claim to democratically represent. Phase 3 contradicts Hackney's climate emergency declaration and local plan in another significant way. Berkeley's energy statement relies on out-of-date planning approval and emissions policy. They haven't calculated CO2 emissions for this huge development. Of particular concern is the proposed gas-fueled CHP energy centre, which is more than unfortunate as described in the addendum report received today. Hackney's sustainability officer said that a review needs to be undertaken of the CHP technology and that new developments should be future-proof so that zero carbon emissions can be achieved by 2040. The scheme needs to comply with GLA energy guidance and emerging government guidance away from fossil fuels is also incorporating large heating most sustainable option. This application should not be passed on the basis that a new energy strategy will be submitted, when this could continue to propose the use of fossil fuels, and any progress towards renewables would significantly impact the design of development. Residents risk being handed a white elephant that will become a burden before too many years have passed. We have worked with architects to develop an alternative design for phase 3, allowing the tree to be retained and the same amount of social and affordable housing to be built. Please refer to the information on the redesign that we sent you.
Thank you.
The options for changing the design are limited.
Okay, thank you.
Plans have seen a huge 63% increase in density. This has created privacy, daylight, and
thank you.
issues.
So
I've only got another sentence.
Leslie now, please. Leslie.
I am a private tenure resident of Woodbury Down, a Woodco board member, and until this month I was on the Woodco executive and the design committee. I'm also speaking for Elaine Gosnell, who's a council tenant waiting to move, and Jeff Bell, who's a Notting Hill Genesis tenant. You're told about rejected options, but not the final one that was agreed by the design committee and confirmed at the March roundtable with the mayor to replace all the units lost from shortening Block A1 with a subsequent Section 73 variation to protect the timelines for completion. Barclays say that planning informally turned this down, but claim the documentation can't be shared. This agreement should have been pursued, not blocked informally. Woodco has voted on a false dichotomy of tree versus social housing. The 2009 master plan and the 2014 hybrid application retained the tree. The 2015 phase 3 application removed it, but assessed only 5 trees, not the Happy Man tree, and never raised this in consultations. Barclays' 2018 tree survey revealed the tree's value, which would have given ample time to design around it in line with Hackney's developing local plan. Opportunities to resolve this situation have been squandered, so we're asking you to please fix this problem now.
Thank you.
That's a minute.
Susie Nelson, please.
Hi, I'm Susie Nelson. I'm a planning academic and I've done research on Woodbury Down over a number of years. The current application involves a 63% increase in density compared to the application approved in 2015. This has significant adverse consequences in terms of privacy, daylight and sunlight for the new homes. Hackney's previous development management policy recommended 18 to 21 metres between homes as a useful yardstick for visual privacy. The distance between blocks in the proposed development is as low as 10.3 metres. The new plan, LP33, restates that design and layout of buildings should enable sufficient sunlight and daylight to penetrate into and between buildings, and that the building research establishment's guidance should be used to assess whether proposals will achieve acceptable levels. The BRE recommended that at least half of the amenity area should receive at least 2 hours of sunlight on the spring equinox.
30 seconds.
Only 6% of the area of one courtyard and 15% of the other will achieve this standard. Despite north-facing homes and deep plan kitchen areas being omitted from their sample, only 84% of rooms included in Barclay's assessment meet the BRE criterion for daylight. Whilst Hackney Planning Policies recommends that guidance should be applied flexibly, the current proposals fall very short of recommended standards of privacy, daylight and sunlight. Disproportionate costs of infrastructure, including the new park, energy centre and works to Seven Sisters Road, are attributed to this phase of development. A fairer apportionment of infrastructure costs would make a lower density scheme financially viable.
Thank you, Susie. Now we've got Janice, please. Minute and a half. Janice,
Can I share my presentation, please?
if you want to, but you'll be very quickly. It's at winding up time as well.
Okay. Can you everyone see it?
Let's have a look at it. We might not be able to share it. Depends what it is. Have we seen it before?
No.
No, you can't then. Right, you've got a minute and a half from now, please. No. Take it off. Take it off. You can't introduce this. I'm sorry. You can't introduce this. Minute and a half, Janice, please.
Certainly. Yeah, I'd just like to share my review of the planning application and in particular the environmental statement and associated documents and why I'm objecting to the application. And in particular, I'm talking about a number of topics that haven't been considered in these documents. The first is the carbon benefit. So first of all, there's no carbon measures. So we talk about carbon emissions, but we know that the Happy Man tree can sequester 1 tonne of carbon from the air in its trunk and roots. And that's a lot more carbon that you're going to get than the 175 seedlings or saplings that we're looking to plant. The second point I noticed is in the tree planting strategy, it doesn't have any mitigation plans. There's no plan B if anything happens to those 175 saplings. The third point I looked at was around the existing ecosystem. So there's a lot of wildlife that lives in the tree at the moment, birds, squirrels, and there's no impact assessment. The fourth point is around the arboricultural method statement. Obviously, this has been nominated, the Happy Man tree has been nominated as one of the top 10 2020 Woodland Trust trees, and it was also used to honour the Queen in 2002 for a Golden Jubilee, but there's no mention of that. And finally, there's no environmental evaluation. So if we look at the ecosystem of the property and environment.
Thank you, Janice. And finally, Barbara, please.
Hello, my objection, my name is Barbara Panusso and I'm a resident of Phase 2. My objection relates to the significant loss of light and privacy to the existing buildings facing the Van Grove. The evolution of the master plan appears to dismiss the impact of the changes in design on the residents of completed phases. It appears to focus on the enjoyment of the residents of phases to come, as if in a vacuum. The master plan should be in place to guarantee that all phases of development follow the agreed principles, regardless of the size of the infringement. However, the objection raised has been dismissed as a minor infringement. The definition of an infringement as minor is entirely a question of viewpoint and one that is possibly the result of the inherent conflict of interest between stakeholders of this regeneration project. While the loss of light and privacy may appear a minor issue compared to the financial gain to be had in continuing to elevate the height of new buildings, it will have a great and everlasting negative impact on the quality of life of us residents of existing phases. All windows in my flat look out on the Van Grove, and according to the new plan, my family will no longer be able to see any portion of sky from a second floor window, as directly opposite, at barely 16 meters away, there will be an extremely wide 6 to 9 story tall building. The same will be the case for the other hundreds of residents of these blocks. I therefore urge you to give due consideration and fair weight to the impact of the increased height of the proposed buildings facing the Van Grove in particular, to the community already populating Woodbury Down. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move to the applicant. Applicant, you have 10 minutes. So it's Daniel and Justin. You don't need to use that, but you can if you wish. Over to you, Daniel, is it speaking?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dan Massey, Development Director for Berkeley Homes. We are extremely pleased to be able to bring our application for Phase 3 back to you tonight. We last came to you on the 23rd of April for the Council's first virtual planning committee, which resolved to grant planning permission subject to referral to the GLA and completion of the Section 106 agreement. Over the past few months, we are pleased to report that good progress has been made with both Hackney officers and the GLA to finalise the Section 106 agreement, including agreeing the financial contributions, review mechanism and terms of reference for Seven Sisters Road. We are keen to commence demolition and construction this October to keep the estate regeneration on track and progress with the next phases of the master plan. The application before you does not propose any changes to the one that was debated and recommended for approval in April. However, since then, and as set out in the officer's report, the application requires reconsideration for technical and legal reasons following recent case law and the adopted Hackney Local Policy LP33. Phase 3 itself will deliver 584 new homes, including 117 social rented and 126 shared ownership homes, allowing secure tenants to decant from phases 4 and 5 and move into their new homes from 2024. It will deliver more public open space for new and existing residents, with a new park, the equivalent of 29 tennis courts, 175 new trees, and children's play space, which along with other ecological measures will improve biodiversity by 154%. And as a point of clarification, we do not plant saplings. We never have planted saplings. They will be decent trees planted. The new energy centre will supply heat and hot water to the whole estate, lowering carbon emissions and forming part of a sustainable approach that also encourages walking and cycling and using new local shops and community space. Over £11 million has been committed in Section 106 contributions, including funds for Seven Sisters roadworks, highways infrastructure, health, libraries, tree planting, car club and TfL bus contributions. The construction will also see the creation of 424 jobs. We remain transparent in our approach to viability and the delivery of affordable homes, achieving a level which is deliverable and viable and will enable the earlier decant of residents in phases 4 and 5 without any further delay. The scheme has been subject to robust independent viability tests on behalf of the Council, and the conclusions presented in April remain unchanged. The design of the scheme was subject to much debate at the April committee. The scheme has been scrutinised through a series of pre- and post-submission workshops, design committees and review panels. The core principles of the original master plan have been applied to the design of Phase 3, and there remains an opportunity for members to examine the details, such as materials and detailed elevation design through the planning conditions that have been imposed on the decision. The Energy Centre, which will supply heat and hot water to all Woodbury Down residents, will be powered by CHP boilers in the short term in accordance with the existing building regulation requirements. For the long term, we are committed to finding low carbon alternative fuel for the centre and are working with officers on a low carbon transition plan to provide this. Any alternative needs to be a holistic strategy, including the wider master plan, and a final strategy will be subject to a planning condition on this application. It will not have escaped your attention that the removal of the Happy Man tree has been of concern to residents, being debated at the April committee and subject to injunctions in Judicial Review Pre-Action Protocol. A significant amount of time has been spent by partners exploring opportunities to retain the tree, and these are set out in the committee report. However, it was concluded that none of these options would result in a better scheme design than is before you. The original master plan considered the removal of the tree, and indeed this is reflected in the extant permission for Phase 3. The officers' committee report reiterates that its removal has been assessed to be acceptable with mitigation that far outweighs the loss of the tree. The mitigation includes the provision of 65 additional trees and a payment of £175,000 for additional street tree planting in Woodbury Down. It is also worth noting that the recent JR was unsuccessful, the courts noting it was totally without merit, and that the Woodbury Down Community Organisation resolved to support the application by overwhelming majority on the 3rd of September last week. Finally, as an aside, We have identified an existing apartment with original Swedish kitchen, and we have taken photographic evidence of the design and are in discussion with the council about how this should be recorded. We are keen to continue on site, supporting local jobs through Ways Into Work and our Reach Apprenticeships programme, and moving residents from substandard accommodation to new homes without further delay. We are proud of what we have achieved as a partnership to date and are committed to ensuring the regeneration is a success for the whole community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you to objectors too. Members, how I'm planning to play this is to go through the first 4 items, and I'll tell you what they are, and we'll take this slowly this evening. I first want to talk about the Holborn Studios issues, so viability and the representations to members. Then I want to go through again any new policies and any issues we have with those. Of course, the Happy Man Tree we want to discuss, and the Seven Sisters issues as well. And then, of course, it is open to members to discuss everything that is in the report and the previous report. If you feel that anything has been raised this evening, and I've got a couple, a few. So that's how I plan to play it. I hope that's okay. So the Holborn thing, in terms of viability, and I guess probably Natalie can explain us this, if she can just confirm. The Holborn Studios and viability was the fact of the council not publishing everything, including its own workings on viability. I think that's the case, and we've now done that, have we?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll bring Rob Brew into this, if that's okay. Can give an update on what we've done with the application.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, I mean the issue with the Holborn Studios case was that a lot of information which wasn't published because it was informal discussions, emails, etc., wasn't published in the form of the website, which enabled anybody who wanted to make a detailed analysis of their own analysis of viability assessment. In this instance, we've published the original viability report, our own the report that BNP Paribas provided us, and the response that the applicants provided. So basically all the information that's informed the committee report is available for public inspection.
Thank you. And none of the numbers changed?
No.
None of the numbers. So Anthony, just to confirm, you've been involved in this, and the officers put together a table, and essentially they show that the costs of the development and the income, the sales, etc., will result in a profit, and we saw that profit, and that's a legitimate and best practice way to now do these things. Is that true?
That's correct. So the approach that the applicant has taken is fully compliant with the planning practice guidance that is the government guidance on viability, and it complies with the approach in the Greater London Authority's guidance on this matter as well. So the approach taken is fully compliant with both local and national guidance.
Thank you. Members, do you have any question on that? Susan, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's just going back on the financial viability. I do understand that now the way this has been done is a compliance. But I think in terms of explanation to objectors, I don't think Catherine did justice to that. It would be useful if in details, the reason, I think one of the reasons why this application has been brought back to us is on that issue, and I think there is the need to explain better to objectors.
Okay, it was about the publication, and we've been told that it was published. But Catherine, can you give us a rundown of what the story is on viability then, please?
Certainly. In support of the application, the applicant submitted a financial viability assessment that was undertaken by a company known as Gerald Eve. The council undertook a review of that, which was done by Anthony, BNP Paribas, And then there were discussions afterwards. A position statement was provided by Gerald Eve. Following the Holborn Studios, of those documents, only a redacted version of the original FEA was originally made public. So once the Holborn Studios judgment was released, we took steps to reduce the amount of redaction. We've assessed it in terms of applied the public interest test, in terms of whether the information that's being provided would allow a third party to understand the financial implications of the development. That was undertaken in association with the QC and with colleagues at BNP. So the financial viability information, including the review by BNP and the subsequent position statement, was subsequently updated with a much reduced degree of redaction. So it provides a lot more data and information. The actual outcome of the documents doesn't change. And these 3 documents have also been made public on the council's website so that third parties can review them, as indeed Susan, one of our objectors explicitly referred to in objections. In addition to that, additional information was provided about areas that were previously redacted. So that's anonymised sales data, etc., etc. So that is effectively it. In terms of the outcomes and the conclusions, there's no change. As set, it is a very simplified table that's set out on the addendum report, but essentially this development allowing profit, which is standard on such developments, just about breaks even, and that has been subject to rigorous independent review and found to be sound, and that hasn't changed, that conclusion.
And Catherine, if it's the case that it's justifiable, if you were to remove a number of the affordable or social housing, you would have to, or they would essentially they would have to move them somewhere else, and that's where you get into the alternatives, putting them higher somewhere else, isn't it?
That's correct. Yes.
And that proves difficult.
Yes, but yeah.
Okay. Is that enough for you, Susan, or?
Thanks, Chair. That's
okay. Thank you
for objectors.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
and home to
Thank you. Can I move to representation? So we were told by the judge that we couldn't just ask our officers to summarise representations to us. We had to accept them, and we could do as we wish. We could read them, whatever. We've had about 30 that I know of. I'm sure some members have read them all, some members won't have read them all. And so we've asked officers to summarise what we all, so we've all seen a summary at least in the addendum, and members will have read the representation as they see fit. So I think, Tom, we're compliant with the judge's views on us reading lobbying matter. Is that correct, do you think?
Chair, it's
Christine.
advisor.
Okay. I thought Tom was here. Okay.
He is indeed. He is assisting in the background.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wish to confirm that what you said is more or less correct, and that with regards to the Holborn Studios judgment, that it is key for members to have the opportunity to access all materials relating to the application before them, so that they could make an informed decision, and what they decide to do with that information, it would be for them to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on that, members? Anna, please.
Chair, would it help for me to read out the list of people that I've been lobbied by?
Wow, I'm not sure, but you can do if you've got it.
I was lobbied by David Pollock, Jeff Bell, Angela Phillips, Patrick Higgins, Joe Wheelings, Anne King, Sylvia Pfeiffer, and Peter Buckingham, and a child as well, as part of their parent as well.
Okay,
But just
thank
for so
you got some of them then, Anna. I got 31, I think it is. Susan,
Chair, sorry, Chair, can I just add that it's part of the whole democratic process being lobbied. So I don't think members should be surprised by this, and it is consistent with legitimate expectations with regards to that we be exchanging views and opinions on the merits of the application. So long as members tonight are able to have an open mind, they haven't sort of like made any predetermination of the application, it's fine to be lobbied. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan.
Thanks, Chair. My question is again part of representation. I know there was an explanation is going back to this petition that was submitted to the council. I know Catherine was talking about this earlier. It was submitted to the council and not to the planning authority. And an average person listening to this will think Hackney Council is the planning authority. They've submitted a petition. Probably would be useful again for people, for Catherine or Natalie to explain that further.
Thank you. Catherine, the petition, what was the process by which you considered that or didn't?
Well, as I said, it hasn't been formally submitted as a representation in respect of this actual application. It is a general approach to the council. It has, obviously, members are aware of it. I don't think any council in the UK is going to have the resources to go through 24,000 plus comments and summarise them for objectors, but it has been drawn to your attention. So obviously you are aware of the weight of opinion and the level of concern amongst local and non-local residents.
Thank you. Any more questions on the representations that we've received? So that was a requirement of the, so that's the new normal, so to speak. I think that's what Christine's telling us. Right, now new policies. Does anybody have any question on those policies? I guess that's the nub of this evening that we heard.
Chair.
Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to gain some clarity, please, on the LP 51, which is the comment that was also raised by one of the objectors just around all development proposals must retain trees for amenity value. Could the officers, relevant officers, just sort of address that? Because it doesn't really give a sort of opt-out in the kind of language or anything. It doesn't say on balance or anything like that. It says must retain. So I'd just like to understand what the officer's thinking is around that.
Thank you.
Well, the wording of the policy is, if I can quote, the removal of non-protected trees, such as this is, it's not in a TPO'd and it's not in a conservation area, will not be supported unless adequate replacement planting is proposed or the removal is in the interests of good arboricultural practice. Now, I don't think we can argue it's in the interests of good arboricultural practice, but in terms of taking the balanced planning decision on the merits of the case and the fact that we're achieving a financial contribution for replacement planting by the council of £175,000, I don't think we can argue that replacement planting can't be adequate. Replacement planting isn't being achieved.
Stephen.
Chair, thank you. Sorry, yes, it says that on one of the, I think, one of the subpoints, but in the policy that was adopted, where it says LP 51, it's got the A and the B. A says all development proposals must retain trees for amenity value, especially veteran trees and hedgerows and natural features, and must incorporate high quality landscaping.
Yes, but that is balanced by the fact that there is this effective, the clause that allows for removal of trees. It's, you know, we obviously seek in every circumstance to retain as many trees as possible, but it isn't always possible. And this does allow us to secure adequate landscaping and adequate mitigation to offset the loss of trees, particularly as in this case, non-protected trees.
Chair, I would suggest that the wording of the plan then either has a fundamental sort of tension between those two kind of statements in it, or we're choosing one over the other, I'm afraid.
Chair, if I may just come in here. So can't just pick out elements of the policy. So it's really important that it's read in full, and that you don't just read kind of one element of the policy. So see, there's an overriding objective to protect and retain trees, but then there's kind of that hierarchy which is set out in Part B of the policy. So it's not that there's a contradiction, it's just that the policy needs to be read in its entirety.
I'm afraid I disagree with you on that, but
okay, let's can we put it up on the screen? Is that possible?
Yes, if you can hold on a second, I'll just try and present my screen. I apologise, this is going to be very small, but I'll try my best.
Just in the meantime, it's a common occurrence on almost every committee where we're balancing different policy objectives, and there's no scheme that ever meets the letter of every single policy. So it's a matter of.
I think
it's a balance.
I think I appreciate that, but I think that if usually it's not in such stark. We don't see developments must meet a certain amount of social housing, for example. We say there's an aspiration to meet a certain amount of social housing, whereas in the local plan there is a very specific line about amenity trees.
Well, yeah, our policy is to maximise housing and to maximise the provision of affordable housing, but it doesn't say at the expense of everything else. And similarly,
no, absolutely
must retain
not.
trees, but that we're not retaining a tree if it's hindering some other important planning objective that couldn't be achieved otherwise. It's the balance of judgment which is important that the committee reaches.
Completely understand that, but the letter of the plan and the way that the plan is written does not give that impression on this specific issue. And so I think actually you made both points for me in that in what you just said, Rob.
Okay. We'll probably come back to that if we need to, because we're going to the happy man.
Sorry, Councillor Stopps, they brought it up on the screen, so I don't know whether you want to.
Yeah. So it says all development proposals must retain trees of amenity value, especially veteran trees and hedgerows and natural features, and must incorporate high quality landscaping, full stop. So that's one part of it. B, proposals resulting in the removal of protected trees and those within conservation areas or having detrimental impact on health and amenity will be refused except when overriding ecological benefits and or wider planning benefits are demonstrated. Is that not what is also part and parcel of that policy?
Are we assuming that a tree of amenity value is exactly the same as a protected tree? Because I thought a protected tree was something specific.
Well, protected trees have even more value.
But the protected tree is a specific status. It's a tree under a TPO and those within conservation area. It is not an amenity tree with amenity value.
Although generally speaking, they will be of amenity value.
Of course, but they are. Are you saying that they are, that when you read that the tree of amenity value specifically means protected tree, or vice versa?
Trees of amenity value. Okay, right. I think you've got to take both of those A and B into account when we make a decision on this, Steve.
So what are we talking about with this tree? Because it's not a protected tree, is it?
No, but it is.
So it's the final sentence in that section B. The removal of non-protected trees as part of development schemes will not be supported unless adequate replacement planting is proposed or the removal is in the interests of good arboricultural practice, which Kate referred to earlier. Obviously, the second part doesn't apply, but the first part is applicable, together with the other benefits which have to be weighed in the balance, what the cost is of retaining the tree.
And so we think that the removal of this tree is counterbalanced by adequate replacement planting. Is that the position of officers?
And the consequences of retaining the tree would result in a loss of affordable housing. That has to be added into the equation as well in reaching the balance judgment.
I mean, we can come on. I mean, we can do that now or later, but I still think that it's a strange position where it's only affordable housing that you would lose, and I understand that that's where the footprint lies. But I still don't think. I think I expressed this view in the last in the April session. It seems to me that it's a bit of a cop out, to be honest, to say that it's we lose the tree or we lose the social housing. I do think it's a bit of a false dichotomy that's been presented to us.
Well, if you lost the market housing, Steve, you'd lose even more of the social housing, the affordable housing, because it would be the market housing that's essentially paying for the affordable housing.
Yeah.
Okay, so hold that thought then. Councillor Levy. So we're not even onto the Happy Man tree, we're onto new policies, onto the...
I know. I do want to echo Steve's comments here, because actually I took this further back to Core Strategy 2010, from which LP 33 evolves. And it's clear there that trees are a valuable feature, we know that, of open spaces, act as a visual foil for buildings. They improve the microclimate and air quality and provide habitat for wildlife. And of particular importance is the visual quality and the amenity of a densely populated borough like Hackney. But it stops there. We at LP33, which has come in 3 years earlier than the Core Strategy 2010 was supposed to be, but it's actually superseded it now, goes further. And as Steve pointed out, it's pretty clear in its definitions of what should be accepted as an application and what should be refused. I'm concerned because one of the objectors has pointed out, I think quite key, but it's not been picked up, is that the carbon loss of the removal of this tree will not be compensated by however many trees are planted in its stead. And I just wondered whether officer could perhaps comment on that. Sorry for being long-winded.
Okay, carbon loss. Catherine, can you deal with that at all?
Well, it's not something that's covered in the environmental statement, and it's not something that's covered in the policy either. But ultimately, there are a considerable number of trees being proposed and landscaping, which will deliver an ultimately greater number of mature trees that will, over time, compensate for the loss of the existing trees on the site in this respect. And obviously, trees do take time to grow. It's not going to be an immediate effect.
And in terms of the carbon assessment, that's been done as per normal, hasn't it, I presume?
That's correct. It's been done in accordance with the standard procedures and has been accepted on that basis by our sustainability officer, who is here to answer questions if necessary.
Okay, so Councillor Levy's sort of angle on this, is not really material, is it? The carbon loss or whatever.
Well, carbon is obviously carbon emissions, and the quality of the environment in general is a planning consideration, but it's not something that a planning system assesses in detail in this respect in terms of actual sequestering of carbon dioxide by trees.
Okay, thank you. Anna, please. Anna, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. I'm really sorry. This is a consequence of not having the papers, is that I would have highlighted this and had a marker in it. But it was probably more to Robert, actually, and just in light of what Susie talked about, which was around the actual size, square meters of the actual flats, and the fact that there's quite a lot that are single aspect. And I just wondered where that would fit now in terms of the plan, the LP 33, and whether or not we should be wanting to encourage more double aspect windows on flats. So I just wondered if Robert could just give me some assurance, or anyone else around some of the concerns that Susie had about the size of the properties and the need to requirement size. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Well, the development plan policies still require a high quality of accommodation and a good quality of design to be delivered. We did go through the single aspect situation in flats and the quality of accommodation in detail in the previous planning subcommittee. It's a relatively low proportion of properties that are single aspect and particularly north facing, but most of those are facing onto Seven Sisters Road, or even and also part of a larger tower, the 20-storey tower. So obviously that won't have the same detrimental impact in terms of that a single aspect apartment may necessarily have. And all of the units do satisfy the nationally described space standards, which are London Plan compliant as well.
Is there a new?
Thank you, Catherine.
Sorry. Is there any new policy associated with that?
There are general policies relating to high quality design, high quality of housing, and design in general, and amenity. Sorry,
Anna, I cut across you.
I had a question, but I think it might come under the Happy Man tree, which is about how many potential homes for people that require shared ownership would be lost. If we
let's go to that later.
Is that in the Happy Man tree? I'll save that for the Happy Man section then.
Susan, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to go back to the questions colleagues have asked, which is in terms of Stephen's question around protection, the tree being a protected tree or veteran. If I not mistaken, one of the objectors did mention that at a point Hackney acknowledged this tree as a veteran. I would like a comment around that. And in terms of Councillor Levy's question around the carbon assessment, with the new policy around health impact assessment, I'm wondering how that links with this, or if there is anything around in terms of health assessment and carbon assessment as well, if there is a link at all. Thank you.
Okay, we'll drift on to the Happy Man tree. The veteran, we've got the arboriculturalist here that's made this assessment. I wonder if you could tell us the story about veteran trees and our tree officer as to whether our view has changed at all. So Simon, is it first? Simon, please.
Chair, I think we have live as well.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Stephen's talking. So I've only been involved with this for a couple of weeks or so, but a veteran tree really is one that's got biological, aesthetic, cultural interest because of their age. So they're generally trees which are in the ancient stage of their life. So they've normally started dying down. They normally would have a lot of dead wood, have a lot of biological interest, a lot of invertebrates, insects, high biodiversity, which I don't think the Happy Man tree, it doesn't show those features. It does have cultural value, but that cultural value really has, it seems to me, has generated more recently during the planning process. And from my fairly limited research, I couldn't see much evidence of cultural value coming from the historical record. I did make inquiries for Hackney Archives. The tree is listed 1959 in the street directory, but that was really the only reference that came forward. I was particularly interested to see whether the pub had been named after the tree or the tree had been named after the pub, but I didn't get any information from that. So I rather suspect that the tree has been named after the pub more recently.
Catherine, have we changed our view on the value of the tree at all?
I don't recall anyone from the council ever having referred to it as a veteran or ancient tree. Nick Jacobs, the previous tree arbor officer, has always been fairly adamant that it was neither veteran nor ancient, and that opinion is shared by Life, his successor, and the consultant that we've employed. And we've certainly described it as mature, fine, attractive, etc. But I don't, as far as I'm aware, we haven't specified that it's a veteran tree, and I'm not sure where that reference comes from, unless it's the applicant's own tree survey.
Okay. Susan, what was your second question? Oh, it was about the affordability, wasn't it?
No, it's relating the new policy around health impact assessment to the carbon assessment, if there is any link at all.
Okay.
The health impact assessment briefly does mention carbon dioxide and carbon emissions, and but mainly in relation to achieving low trafficked areas and making it a nice place, an open place for residents. And it also discusses air quality in quite a lot of detail, which feeds in from the environmental statements as well. But it doesn't go into much detail about actual carbon emissions within that document, because it's not directly a health matter.
And the Sustainability Officer, can you tell us how you've analysed the carbon issues, please?
Good evening, everybody. The carbon emissions in our current local plan only account for regulated carbon emissions. So there is no account for carbon sequestration in our local policy LP 55. So we can understand that there is an interest in carbon sequestration, but it's not accounted in any of our local policies.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, so any more of these new policies that people want to talk about? And no?
Councillor Stobbs, the Chair, would you like me just to revisit? I've got the policy in front of me now. LP 51 on the tree.
So let's talk about this Happy Man tree then. Please, if you can, Natalie. You wrote this, did you?
Not personally, but I was involved. I've managed the team that developed the local plan. Yes, I'm probably quite well placed to comment on how the policies are drafted, their objectives, their meaning, and how they could be, how they should be considered and implemented. So hopefully that's going to be of benefit. So LP. So I'm looking at the policy as we speak. So LP 51. It's in two parts. The first part is kind of the starting point, if you like. So all development proposals must retain trees of amenity value, and then it talks about veteran trees, hedgerows, etc. I mean, we recognise that the Happy Man tree is a tree of amenity value. Obviously, we've been very clear from the outset that it's neither a veteran or an ancient tree, but it's a tree of amenity value. So the starting point with all development proposals is that we would seek to retain trees. But then you then have to then go on to read Part B. So it's really important that, as I said before, that the two elements of the policy are read alongside each other. So the key part of Part B with this regard is the section on the removal of non-protected trees. The policy then goes on to say the removal of non-protected trees as part of development schemes will not be supported unless adequate replacement planting is proposed, or the removal is in the interest of good arboricultural practice. That is the important thing that you need to consider alongside Part A of the policy.
And if you just applied Part A to everything, we wouldn't take any trees down at all, would we?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, Catherine, anything else to add? Can't hear you, Catherine.
Sorry, apologies. I was just going to add that in any development plan, essentially each policy is seeking its own interest, and it's very narrowly defined in terms of community facilities, regeneration, amenity, quality of accommodation and design, for example, and all of those policies seek to achieve the optimum outcome for that particular interest. But essentially, it's a question of balancing all of the competing interests and trying to reach the right decision and the best decision at the end of the day.
Okay. Any more questions then, or issues for people?
Chair, on new policies or on the tree?
Either now. Let's go to everything. Everything you want to ask.
Councillor Stobbs, Councillor Potters has her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I can't see you. Councillor Potter, please.
She has her hand up for several minutes.
Sorry, I can't see you.
Oh, sorry, I'm in the dark, I'm afraid.
Yes, I can see you now.
I just get the impression that many of the local residents don't feel they've had sufficient knowledge about the tree over time, and I just, as reflection, I just think perhaps we need to look about the way we do consultation. So that's just a comment, really. But I suppose I want to go to Daniel and ask him at Berkeley Homes the approach that Berkeley Homes take and why they have not prioritised retaining that tree at an earlier stage in the design process. I'd like to hear a bit more of a full answer on how that tree was considered at the outset. The other question I'd like to ask is about the energy centre. Now, a lot of the objections are very concerned legitimately about carbon emissions, so I'm quite interested to hear what Catherine was saying. I think if it was Catherine or Daniel, to say that the energy centre is actually going to be designed flexibly so that you will be able to bring in alternative energy sources at a suitable time when the efficiencies, etc., and those are developed to be able to cater to, presumably, to this size of development. So I wanted to know what kind of talking you've done so far. You talked about a low carbon transition plan, so you must have something you can perhaps share, or something you can convey about where that conversation is going currently. Thank you.
So Daniel, they were aimed at you to start with.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the first point in relation to design, obviously our key focus is to work with the statutory authorities, with our local partners, with the local residents, to come up with the best designs we can possible for the local area that create the best environments. And wherever we can, we would seek to retain trees that have value, that add value to the scheme in terms of their appearance and their amenity value. In this particular instance, we've been in discussions on phase 3 since 2015, and none of those discussions have involved, in terms of finding the best design solution for the overall approach to phase 3 and provision of homes, none of those design solutions have identified the retention of this particular tree. I think it is fair to say that when we were made aware of the feelings around the tree and the local concerns at the end of last year, this was the first time that they had been raised, these particular concerns. We did indeed undertake consultation on what is known as the rose garden opposite the tree in question as part of the consultation process. And at no point, even in that discussion, was it identified as a particular concern. So, it's something that we would dearly we always look at in terms of the environmental value. We wouldn't, if we'd have known these concerns, have gone down a design route that we did, but we are in the place that we are, and we think we have a very high quality planning application. There is a point, I think, to pick up on the carbon sequester. Just very quickly, the London plane tree in question has a carbon sequester of 3,167 units per year, roughly, and the 5 semi-mature lime trees that are proposed in that location with approximately 5,630 units per year. So we have identified that from a carbon sequester basis, we will have addressed it.
Thank you. And the second question was about the CHP. What's the reality of getting a new power system when it comes to when the regulations, I guess, change?
Okay, I think the reality of it is, again, this is something that we've been working on with the council and for some time now. The actual basic district heating principle technology is useful in many ways, but one of the benefits of it is that we can plug in new technologies as we go. So the energy centre, as proposed, can have new technologies plugged into it, in effect, to provide the heat. So we do have that flexibility inbuilt within the scheme. We are looking at a plan to reduce the carbon output, and those discussions to date have involved things such as looking at heat recovery from the local underground network.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Claire? Katie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Two tree-related points that haven't come up before. I've been crossing questions off my list as other members asked them. One is that there was the objectors were saying that there was no condition about maintenance of newly planted trees. I wonder if the officer could take us to the relevant condition in the report, if it's there, or if not, if we could add it. I know I clearly remember it was in the consent that we granted in April, although I accept that sort of is in abeyance because the permission wasn't issued. The other is a completely different issue, but one of the many people who wrote to me says that the drawings on the website show trees on the exact site of the Happy Man tree, and this person asked if those trees were going to exist, and if so, why it was necessary to remove this tree in order to plant other trees there later on. So two completely different points, but I'd be grateful if the officers could address those.
Yes, the first, well, if I can do them in reverse order, the issue with the removal of the plane tree and its replacement with other trees is to do with the fact that to undertake the works to build the proposal under consideration would require such traumatic works and disruption to the root system and the canopy that it would not be able to survive in any meaningful sense as a result, and it would just be too cramped up against the building. The proposed lime trees are smaller, they have less requirements, and they can be maintained in a different way, so they can be accommodated within the pavement. But Simon can probably elaborate on that. But if I can just quickly go to the conditions on the report, there is an environmental plan required to be submitted. I'm very sorry, I've got to just run through this, I'm very afraid. And the landscaping does require, has a 10-year maintenance clause included. So 10 years, it's longer than standard. We normally only put on 5 years. So that is to, in the event of trees dying further down the line. And I am aware that members of the public have raised the issue of some trees elsewhere on the Woodbury Down estate dying, and they have been reported to our enforcement and street scene teams who are going to be investigating. But yes, I will find the exact condition for you. I believe it's condition 20, landscape and public realm environmental scheme. There's all planting, seeding and turfing shall be implemented in the first planning season following first occupation of the relevant phase as defined by the approved phasing plan, with the exception of a final landscaping plan for the temporary vehicle access to Newton Close, which will be implemented in accordance with the details approved in respect of the clause above. Any plants or trees that die or are removed, damaged or diseased within a period of 10 years from the substantial completion of the development shall be replaced to the satisfaction of the local planning authority in the next planting season with others of a similar size or species.
Thank you. Anna and then Susan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies. Obviously, I'm new to the committee and obviously wasn't present in the April one, but I just wanted to be clear, it's more for Mr. Massey. So the proposed removal of the tree was always there in the initial plans for this entire site? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so historically the tree was removed as part of the original master plan, which was actually undertaken by the council. That was approved in 2008.
2008, interesting, okay. And my second question is...
Catherine, is that correct?
There was an original master plan approved in 2008, which was subsequently superseded by another master plan in 2013. The indicative drawings for the 2013 master plan showed the tree as being retained, but this was in the outline part of the development. Subsequently, the Reserved Matters application was approved in 2015 for phase 3, and the drawings for that clearly show the tree as being removed, and no one objected to the application on the grounds of removal of that tree at that time.
We have to give weight to that. We have done before.
Sorry, I beg your pardon?
And the weight of that decision for the...
Well, it is an extant planning permission. It has been implemented and it can potentially be built out.
Okay, thank you. Anna, you have one more?
Thank you, Chair. This is my final question, and it was just to confirm that if we were to keep the Happy Man tree, I just wanted to know, and I apologise again, it's because I've got my papers all on my screen and I can't define it, how many actual, in a round figure, shared ownership flats would not be built if we kept the tree?
I think I can answer this because we looked at this in detail in April, and the answer to that question is in order to retain the tree with enough space for it to flourish and live its natural life out, live another 100, 150 years, you'd lose 24 shared ownership flats.
Gosh.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This is actually a light question, sort of, or a comment. If we were to grant permission tonight, I'm just wondering, since there is going to be a replacement tree on the site of Happy Man, I'm wondering whether Barclays Home would be happy to name that tree with a plaque, another Happy Man tree, as part of, that's why I said it's a lighter question. But
yeah, we'd be more than willing to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're drawing to an end. I just want to say something, and that is that cities are incredibly sustainable, you know, in terms of people living in high density places like Woodbury Down. If all places were as sustainable as that, as Woodbury Down will be, then we'd be in less difficulties than we are now, because it has been designed in that light, with a very low car ownership and the greening, etc., etc. So living in close proximity and density is a sustainable thing to do. This committee, I know, rarely rarely allows trees. The planning service, the planning system at Hackney doesn't take lightly the loss of trees, but occasionally that will happen. The urban form does move around for the reasons that I spoke about, and Woodbury Down is clearly one of them. So it is with a heavy heart that one accepts the loss of that tree, for all the reasons we've discussed. But in the round, we are creating a sustainable community out there, and the application is I think demonstrated that in terms of the balance. So that's my particular take on this. So we've got a recommendation, and what I'd like you to do is I will put, oh, sorry, Councillor Levy, you have something to say?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I actually haven't quite finished, but I wanted to refer to the officer's report at 6.6.4. First of all, the definition of, I believe what we are taking as for granted is that if this tree were to be defined as an ancient tree or a veteran tree, we'd be looking at it differently. The fact is, so it's a question of definition, question of age. What I'm trying to establish is that are all trees considered ancient in terms of their species? In other words, a oak tree can be considered ancient at 500 years, but a London plane tree can perhaps be considered ancient at 150 years. Because after all, the first plantings of which I think are extant in Berkeley Square are only 50 years older than the HMT, and therefore I think in terms of what the London plane tree is, it might very well be considered a veteran or ancient tree. The other point I wanted to raise, and perhaps we can get some clarity on that, the other point I wanted to raise at 6.6.4, by the way, the government website actually says there are very few ancient trees in this country. The other point is that regarding what was considered as an alternative to the retention or the removal of the retention of HMT, and apparently a study was made by Berkeley, and I believe that there were a number of options considered, which weren't brought to the committee in April. I wasn't aware of it, but I may have missed it, admittedly. But one of the options is that the London plane tree could have been retained in a pollarded form. And interestingly, the London plane tree is quite unique in as much in its pollarded form it can flourish. So what consideration was actually given to that, and how much weight can those designs, which weren't brought to us, but obviously of sufficient concern to Barclays, who actually drew up various options for retention.
So there's two questions. Perhaps our arboriculturalist can tell you about the difference between a veteran oak and a veteran plane, etc.
Yes, it's very much species dependent. I mean, a veteran birch could be, relatively young. A veteran yew might be very much older. So that's the answer to the first point. Pollarding is usually something, or it should be in arboricultural terms, something that you start at a fairly young age and you keep doing repeatedly, so that the pruning wounds are not too large in diameter. If you take a fully formed tree and then you try and, well, in inverted commas, pollard it, it would be more like, would be referred to as topping. So you get very big dimension on the wounds, and then you tend to get decay going into those wounds, and you end up with a sort of spiral decline. So it's very difficult or impossible to properly pollard a tree once the canopy has reached its full extent.
And Robert, can you answer the question about the alternatives? Some of them weren't brought forward and some of them were, is one of the suggestions.
Well, none of them form part of the consideration of the application because they're not actually part of the application. But
I'm talking about Berkeley's alternatives that you discussed.
Yeah, well, we discussed all sorts of things in meetings. We had a detailed discussion primarily to answer the question is what would you need to do to the scheme in order to retain the tree? And we looked at all sorts of options, loads and loads of them. There was one which, rather than pollarding, which was basically retaining the tree in its current form in terms of its canopy and stuff, but basically giving it sort of like a severe pruning every year or two. And that you could have retained a bit more of the proposed building, but it would have basically frozen the tree in time and it would never have developed to its sort of full potential. And we thought that hindering it in that way really isn't achieving a good arboricultural result. That would have meant the loss of fewer flats. I can't remember the exact number, but the document that Barclays produced in order to facilitate the discussions has been published on the website, so people can see it if they wanted to. but it's not actually an application document as such. It doesn't describe the development. It's not to so it's not actually formally part of the planning application that's before the committee. It's just sort of like a document to assist in sort of the discussion, to explain how the discussions went about the possibility of retaining the Happy Man tree. Then, if that helps.
Thank you.
Have I answered the question?
Well, I think we went. It seems to have gone more than that, because the study is quite detailed in the various options that were put forward. I'm surprised that, you know, in terms of what could have been achieved and what still can be achieved is it has not been, in my view, sufficiently explored. That's my point.
Okay. Okay.
Well, we had a lot of meetings about it, several months of discussion, all sorts of alternatives.
And we discussed it at the April meeting. So it was about putting height onto the other blocks to the south, I think, and that would introduce lighting, more lighting issues for the other blocks to the north. I think I remember that discussion. Rob, was that it? Yeah,
Yes.
We have discussed it.
And there were detrimental townscape impacts about making the tall buildings even taller.
Yeah,
Those.
all of that. Okay, I think we all know what we're about now, and so the recommendation is strengthened for planning permission, subject to a legal agreement and referral to the Mayor of London. I'd like you to, so first of all, I'm asking for that, but keep your hand up, please, and then I'll roll call. So I'll read it again. So the recommendation is to grant conditional planning permission, subject to a legal agreement and referral to the Mayor of London. All those in favour, please show. Okay, now a roll call. I can see Vincent, 4. Steve Race, please.
4, Chair.
Katie, please.
4.
Claire, please.
4.
Susan, please.
4.
Anna, please.
4.
Okay, that's all of the 4s. Any against, please? Any against that I can't see? Abstentions, please. Councillor Levy, you're abstaining? Can you roll call, please? Councillor Levy, you need to say the words, I'm afraid.
Abstaining, sorry. Yeah.
Abstaining. It's the fact that not everybody can see all of us.
Yes.
All of us counted? Okay, that is passed. Thank you very much indeed. We'll have a break and then go to item 7. Anna.
Chair, do I need to stay to do my declarations of interest formally when we go on to the next item?
Thank you very much for your help. You can go home now.
Okay, and thank you for the people, the community that spoke today as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Chair, how long is the break for, please?
10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So I can see 2018. So if we come back at just before past. Oh.
So, Chair, just to recap in terms of the speakers or speaker for this item, we have Abigail Evans.
Yeah, she was here earlier.
Speaker, yep. And then Tanya Jordan, and I'm was it Baba? Apologies if I've pronounced your first name incorrectly, sir. Are here just to answer questions.
Thank you.
Abigail seems to have disappeared off my screen, which slightly concerns me.
I'm still here.
Oh, good. Oh, great. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you for confirming. I get slightly worried when people disappear off the screen who shouldn't.
Probably because I haven't said anything for a while.
That's all right. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you.
How do you get back onto the screen? You say something and keep you. There was a Google grid. Where's that, Mario? Has he found a Google grid for us yet?
I think they were still going through the options in terms of what they were adding to Google.
I think you can see a maximum of 16.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
We did. It was really good, though.
Yeah. I mean, I did find out something earlier on today that obviously if you've got a Gmail account, a calendar invite is fairly self-explanatory when it comes through. But I understand if you're receiving a calendar invite and it's not on a Gmail account, I don't think you get the option to click on yes, maybe, or no. And I think that's sometimes where that's been an issue where I'm sending people the calendar invite and that they're in the guest lists on the calendar invite. There's no tick next to the name because I understand they can't confirm the calendar invite. So hence me sending around earlier on today the joining details again. So yeah.
Absolutely, you are right. You don't have that option if you don't have a Gmail account.
Yes, yeah. I only found that out earlier today because obviously I just send the calendar invite and assume everybody can click on yes, maybe, or no. But apparently that is not the option. So
no.
Okay,
yeah.
we've got Abigail. Abigail, can we see you? We can see your image. Is that you behind there?
I'm just switching the camera on. Can you see me now?
Yes, that's right. Looks the same. Tanya?
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Oh, that's you, Tanya. And Baba?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so that's there. We've got Barry there.
Hello.
We've got Natalie. We've got legal officer. Christine, are you there?
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you.
And
so in terms of committee members, I think we're just waiting for Councillor Potter. Oh, Councillor Potter is here. Oh,
Councillor Rains, Councillor Lee, Fajana Thomas, Katie, that's all of us.
Yes, Councillor Lynch, as he announced before the end of the last item, has now left the meeting.
Okay, over to you, Barry, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to present my screen.
Well, hang on, my cat wants to get out. Oh. Okay, that's there, Barry.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. This item relates to the former police station on Lower Clapton Road. This is a view. This is the site plan showing the.
Barry, sorry to interrupt. You're very quiet. Could you?
Okay, let me get a bit closer. I'll speak a bit louder, maybe. Does that help?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay.
Louder or closer.
So this is the site boundary outlined in red. The site's located on Lower Clapton Road, adjacent St John's Churchyard and St John's Church Road to the south. This is a picture of the front elevation of the former police station. So an application to redevelop the site to provide a new school was refused by members in 2015, but was subsequently approved on appeal. So the application in front of members today is to discharge two conditions attached to that appeal decision, both of which relate to the basis for review, and that's why it's being brought before members today. So that's the school travel plan and the school management plan conditions. So just to go through the site context briefly, this is the front elevation of Lower Clapton Road. the side elevation on Churchwell Path. This is a view down Churchwell Path, which is a TfL cycle route. And this is a view looking east on St. John's Church Road, and the rear entrance of the school will be just this on the left-hand side of the picture where the cursor is. So the application to discharge the travel plan that was submitted has been assessed by officers and is considered acceptable to demonstrate that sustainable modes of transport would be promoted to both pupils and staff at the school. Some changes were made to the document following initial submission, one of which was a commitment to sign up to the School Streets programme. So that would be on St. John's Church Road. You can see where the cursor is here. So effectively the school streets would close off the street during school opening and collection times, and it would help alleviate the concerns of residents, which was that there would be unauthorised dropping off of pupils and collection, despite the best attempts of any travel plan. So I think it's an added assurance there, and I think a positive addition to the travel plan. Another step which is included in the travel plan and the operational management plan is the location of marshals, which is shown in this image here. And that would help with pupil safety in terms of pedestrian movement, but also help control any unauthorised pickup and drop off, which again was one of the key concerns that officers had when it was refused. So officers believe that the measures to mitigate the transport impacts of the school have been mitigated as best as possible for a school of this size in this location. The operational management plan also covers the school management plan covers the operational use as well as the transport impact. So that includes the use of outdoor spaces. So this is a plan showing the layout of outdoor spaces on the site. So the St. John's Church Road is where my cursor is here. There's a play space located just beside it, beside the entrance, and then another play space located centrally within the site. There's also an outdoor space, which is a rooftop study area. So the operational management plan sets out the staggered use of those spaces quite clearly to minimise the immediate impacts in terms of noise. And it also defines quite clearly the use of the rooftop space in terms of it being just for quiet study rather than play. So I think that was another concern of residents, that space might be used as play space. The operational management plan also covers matters such as emergency exit and use of outdoor facilities and the management of people to and from that. And overall, it's quite a robust document, and officers feel that it's acceptable in terms of demonstrating that the amenity impacts and transport impacts would be effectively mitigated. So overall, the two conditions are considered acceptable, and the recommendation is to discharge both. Thank you, Chair. So should I stop presenting, or is Abigail going to speak next?
Yep, I'm ready. I think, Vincent, we can't hear you at the moment.
You're on mute, Chair.
On mute. Okay, apologies. Abigail, please.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Abigail Evans from HSP Consulting, and I've prepared the school travel plan and the school management plan in coordination with the Olive School Hackney. I have been providing transport advice to the school since 2014, and along with my professional experience, have knowledge of how the school operates and have interacted with staff and parents in the preparation of the two documents that are being brought to your consideration tonight. I would like to thank local residents for their feedback on the two documents and also reassure them that the school does aspire to be a good neighbour and welcomes ongoing feedback to the operational and travel characteristics of the school. Firstly, I'll just summarise the travel plan. The travel plan under consideration tonight is the pre-occupation version and provides a framework, comprehensive list of measures and an action plan to deliver the following aim, which is to ensure the estimated mode share targets can be achieved, including future reductions in the percentage of pupils and staff travelling to the school by car. The travel plan is a working document and in accordance with the planning condition is required to be updated within 6 months of occupation, following baseline surveys, which will be done within 3 months, which will record how pupils and staff are travelling to and from the school. With the school planned to open after the October half term, the travel surveys will be undertaken in November this year, and the updated travel plan submitted to Hackney Transport officers and uploaded to the TfL STAR system before the end of April 2021, in line with the planning condition. Following this, annual travel surveys will be carried out at the same time in November. Additional surveys may be undertaken in the spring or the summer term, which will help to understand how the weather and daylight hours influences travel behaviour. Although the travel plan is actively implemented throughout the school year, a formal review will be submitted to the council and TfL STARS every 12 months from the post-occupation travel plan date. And this will assess the progress and includes mode of travel surveys and evaluation of the previous action plan and setting of new targets to work on in the coming year. Targets will be agreed with a Hackney Travel Plan officer and will be ambitious, practical, achievable and realistic. One of the travel plan actions is to set up a working group. This will include the school community, but invites will also be extended to representatives from nearby residents, the church, businesses and schools. The working group will discuss the progress of the travel plan in achieving its targets and address any travel related issues raised by neighbours, as well as recognising successful initiatives. In response to the coronavirus pandemic, the school has staggered start and finish times for each class or bubble to maintain social distancing and also reduce loading on public transport and nearby pedestrian cycle routes. Any changes to these timings will be communicated to the school community and neighbours. Further, as part of TfL's response to coronavirus, Hackney Council is implementing further measures to encourage a greater uptake of active travel modes. This includes, as Barry mentions, the School Streets Initiative, which will be implemented at the junction of St John's Church Road with Urswick Road. It will be a manned temporary barrier for an hour at school start and finish times. Residents and their vehicles, essential visitors, will be able to apply for an exemption to access the street, but no other vehicles will be permitted. Travel information packs are currently being prepared for staff and parents in line with the action plan. This will include advice on how to travel to and from the school by sustainable modes of transport and also information on the limitations of car parking. The pack will also notify staff and parents that they are expected to act considerately to neighbours when arriving and departing the school. Regarding the school management plan, this describes the day-to-day operations of the school and in particular how the school will organise playtimes, lunchtimes and the arrival and departure of pupils each day. The document sets out how the school will operate in its first year of operation with 180 pupils and also when at full capacity. During the first year and in response to coronavirus, the playtimes and lunchtimes will be staggered per class bubble, but the overall start and finish periods of these activities will remain as if the school was at full capacity. The plan also includes details of the timing and location of the marshals that will supervise the school accesses, entrance to the church access road, front and back entrances of the school, and also St John's Church Road and its junction with Urswick Road. Once the school is operational, then it may be necessary to adjust the timings or locations of the marshals in response to travel behaviours or feedback from local residents or the church. The document also includes details of off-site activities which were raised at the previous planning approval committee meeting. This sets out for each year the off-site activities that pupils will participate in, which are all planned to be within walking distance or using small cycle groups or public transport. Okay, if that's 5 minutes, I just want to say that I've got Tanya Jordan here, the planning consultant, and I also, Baba Mirza is the head teacher now for the school, and they'll be happy to answer questions along with myself.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask Baba this? I mean, clearly, it only needs you to look at a map to see that there is literally zero car parking available to anybody arriving at that school, and that was I guess the thrust of the problem that the transport people had initially. It's a really constrained site in terms of arriving by motor vehicle, and I guess we need some assurance that you guys recognise that, and you're working with the consultants and our teams to minimise. It has to almost be zero, I think, vehicular arrivals at your site.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, Chair.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think the travel plan is very detailed. It provides lots of options for parents. I think my job and our job at the school is to communicate that to parents. And I think we're going to start that very soon. And so, you know, we've obviously got quite, you know, not a large, long lead time, but we, you know, we're going to make sure that we communicate all of the routes, be that, you know, whatever the bus routes, the walking routes. Of course, we've got 2 existing sites at the moment, and we've got siblings on those sites. But I think the plan is very clear and it's very detailed and it's a workable plan. So I think it's very practical. Lots of the elements that we're already using now. So we're not talking about a proposal that may or may not work. Some of those elements we're already implementing on those other 2 sites. So we're just transferring some of those ways of working to the new site. But of course, it's a 3rd site, and I've looked very closely at the plans, and I believe that they will work. It simply is a matter of us communicating those to the parents and also then implementing in it. But I'm confident as a principal that we will be successful in doing that. And as has been mentioned by Abigail, I think the working group will be key, because what we're not saying is this is a static plan. This is something that will evolve, and we will be happy to collect feedback from, you know, local residents in the working group to adapt that plan so that's even tighter as we move forward into the first few months and year of the school.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Susan.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to find out, in terms of, there is this comment around there's no review statement in the plan. An officer comment in response to that is that the travel plan will be monitored going forward. I just want to understand how that will be monitored. That is my first question. And the second one is around the commitment to participate in the school street program. So what form of commitment pledge is that? Are we going to condition that? Thanks.
So that's Barry and Joe, perhaps, is it?
Yeah, I think just on whether or not we condition the school streets, I think, you know, there's a commitment within this plan, which effectively is how we've, you know, got confirmation that there's an agreement to take
Can't hear you, Barry.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, as whether we would condition, so effectively, because it's included within this travel plan, that's the commitment we have. So that's the enforceable commitment we have to sign it to school streets. But school streets is something maybe Joe can expand on, but obviously it's an experimental program, so it's something that is, you know, going to be introduced, and we'll kind of see how it works, I suppose. Maybe Joe, do you want to maybe expand on the school streets program and then also the monitoring of the travel plan, if you don't mind?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Thomas. In regard to the school streets program, so school streets has been established for, I believe, a number of years, and has been incrementally rolled out to schools in Hackney. Now, the situation with the coronavirus has exacerbated that rollout, and that means that, as far as I understand, we've got 40 schools now in the borough who are having experimental school streets put in, and that they'll be put in for an 18-month trial or experimental period. After 6 months, I believe residents are able to communicate with borough officers and give their sort of feedback about the functionality of the school street. So in terms of conditioning it, this is something that we'd be doing as part of an experimental traffic order. So that would be the sort of legislative way that would work, if that makes sense. Just in regard to the, does that sort of give an adequate answer? Is there anything more I can touch on?
It's fine. That's sort of, I know more about our plans, the schools or ski programs, street scheme in Hackney. That's why I asked that question. So,
Christine has got something to add. I suspect I know what it's going to be, but please, Christine.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to add that I understand that the application before us is with regard to discharge of, submission of details pursuant to condition 12 and condition 5. And I just really wanted to say that you really can't add a condition on top of a condition. Either we agree with the officer's recommendation that the conditions are discharged, or the conditions aren't discharged, and that's it. But you can't add a condition on top of a condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? So I think that's it. So without further ado, the recommendation is to discharge conditions, just as Christine has told us. So that's both of them. We can do one at a time. Do we do one at a time, Christine?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so condition 5. All those in favour, please show and keep your hand up. Okay, roll call. Vincent? Susan, I can see next.
yes, 4.
Katie?
4.
Michael?
4.
Claire?
4.
Steve?
4.
Is that all of us? I think it is.
And Chair, just for clarification, you are voting in
favour. 4. Sorry.
Thank you.
Hand down. Any against? There aren't any other. So condition 12, discharge condition 12. All those in favour, please show. So Vincent is 4. Susan?
4.
Katie?
4.
Michael?
4.
Claire?
4.
Stephen?
4.
Thank you. That's all of us. Okay, well.
Chair, and yourself? You didn't say what yourself was.
You did.
He said right at the start.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. We look forward to seeing your school then, Barbara, and I hope you can control all those vehicles. Please. I should have your residents on your case, because
thank you very much.
I shall also be there on day 1 as well.
Okay, yes, I'm sure we'll go there on day 1. When is day 1, Baba?
Day 1 is the 2nd of November.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you very much. I don't know if Catherine's still there, and well done to everybody who was involved in that Woodbury Down. I know it's a lot of activity, and whatever the outcome, it was a grueling one, I suspect. So we haven't got time to chat and network and what have you, so I'll say goodbye, I guess.
Chair, as always, it wouldn't be a planning meeting if I didn't say that there is the delegated decisions document, please.
Christine, what did you want to say?
Delegated decisions, Chair.
Delegated decisions.
We note them.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Did you wave?
No, I just say thank you.
Waving goodbye. Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to committee members, and thank you, staff.
Thank you, Gareth, for everything. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
I am ceasing recording now.
Thanks, everybody.
And also the stream.